Welcome, everybody. I'm Maxim Brassard. Defender Fridays, just quick pitch here. The concept Defender Fridays is we get to talk at Lima Charlie with all kinds of people in the industry doing really fascinating stuff, all over the spin around the defensive side. And so we just want to expose that to the community, have people come in. This is not, a slides kind of presentation. Is really meant to be just a chat. So feel free to join us even as like a panelist and ask questions, all that good stuff. So today we have Shaun. How are you, Shaun?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great, doing great.
Good.
So would you mind doing a quick intro about yourself? I think you've got a pretty interesting background.
Yeah, sure. Well, I currently my real I say my real job. My full-time job is at GitHub. I am part of the cloud security program. We call it fundamentals, but it's basically a cloud security program. I've been there 3.5-ish years, maybe 3.25 years. And Yeah, I've been really enjoying that. Before that, I was 20 years at the National Security Agency in offensive and defensive cyber operations. My background's in software development, but I really moved all in on cloud 2016, 2017, and just really enjoyed the freedom of being able to just build stuff from a command line, which I thought was just, crazy stuff that I could do. So, and destroy things with a command line too, I guess is the right, also part of it. I also am a SANS instructor and a course author with SANS. I wrote a class on cloud threat detection, which we teach all throughout the year. And hey, Jeff, how you doing? Good to see you. So that's me. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, going from intelligence to the public cloud world is an interesting experience, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, one of the reasons I did leave was because although the government is doing more with cloud, it just wasn't going as fast as I wanted to. And so that was one of the main reasons why I was like, okay, it's time. It's been 20 years. It's time to go so I can go and really try and break some things in other places. And so it's worked out well though.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I always felt like that when coming into the public world where there's all these tools and they're doing amazing, like those
Yeah.
are amazing tools. And I've never heard I've never worked with any of them because it was all internal tooling. So it's good stuff. I also really like that, and maybe I'm reading more into it, but so you said cloud security at GitHub is called fundamentals. That's right?
Yeah, or anything that has to do with like security posture and assessments and that interaction, we call that fundamentals program. And so there's a lot of things that feed into that. And I don't deal with a lot of those things, but scorecarding and all that kind of stuff that, a lot of companies and certainly the government has to do, we call it fundamentals. And we have a process for doing that. And we're the cloud posture management kind of side of it is what my team does. And then I work a lot with our other teams on vulnerability assessments and host configuration and even intrusion detection, evaluation, detection, stuff like that. I help them out as where I can. So yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I mean, so I'm gonna go on a limb. I'm gonna say like GitHub is probably a pretty unique place in the systems and how you're thinking about, you're defending all of that stuff. Can you give us a glimpse, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, isn't every place unique? I think everyone would say that place is unique, and that's usually a good word for on fire, right? Okay, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think GitHub, one of the things that makes I think GitHub really unique is that everybody at the company is like a software developer, just naturally the kind of people that we attract. I mean, my boss's boss writes code all the time and they write it in Ruby and I don't like Ruby, but anyways, I have to, but everyone's that's kind of the mentality because that's the products we build for. And so there's a lot of teams that are doing a lot of stuff in cloud. We also are a lot of on-prem as well. So we're multiple clouds on-prem. So it's like kind of everywhere. And so we have to be able to let teams move really fast. And so a lot of the challenge has been figuring out how to let them move fast at the same time trying to ensure that things are being done as securely as possible and kind of claw back those bad decisions that might have happened 5 years ago, which I think that's I say that's unique, but I think that after teaching for 5 or 7 years, geez, you talk to a lot of people, and they're usually in a very similar boat. Like it's like government and financial industries. Like you have to get permission before you do everything. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's startups, and they're just throwing all kinds of stuff out there as fast as they can. And most organizations are somewhere in the middle, and they're always trying to get to a little bit closer to that middle. That's always kind of the goal.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, but the reason I was thinking unique is from the perspective I think about GitHub in the same way as I think about AWS and Cloudflare. In kind of one corner of the internet, they kind of are the biggest part of this. Like GitHub
Yeah.
goes down,
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of people have a lot of really critical problems.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of work to, I mean, it's actually been quite amazing watching this system that's run, and it's got to keep running. And if anything blips, the amount of focus that gets put onto it to try and recover and figure what happened. And for a company that moves fast and makes a lot of changes to be able to do those kind of recoveries pretty quick, is pretty amazing to watch them do it. So when I came in, a lot of it was okay. I want to make some changes, but I can't make changes too fast, and I can't make it too holistic because I can't bring anything down, especially things that I don't understand really well. And so I had to kind of gradually approach the security controls that I wanted to enforce in place. We had a lot of really great, this is the way we should do it, but then it was like, okay, if it's a written down, but we're not enforcing it, we're not auditing it, we don't have implementation diagrams, it's just a best practice, and it's nice to have. But in order for us to implement every single control, it's got to be documented. We got to provide some kind of scripting for how to do it. It's got to be audited. And then I have to be able to tap the owner's shoulder and tell them that they have to do this. And then they have some kind of timeline in which to do it. And then, of course, we're always focusing on trying to get the things so that there's blocking, guardrails, but that can be difficult to get your handle on until you have a better understanding of the environment and ensuring that that everything's kind of, you can lock this down across the entire environment. That gets harder to get to. But
Right, right, right. Is there kind of high level, presets about this is how GitHub thinks about X or enforces X or Y? I always think of these kind of, again, unique kind of organizations. What was it that like NASA famously was like, when you write C code, it does not allocate memory past in it. And so, these weird, like only NASA would kind of go and do that, like
yeah,
for GitHub.
I don't know. I would say that. I'm trying to think of something that would be really unique to GitHub for it. I don't think I can say that because I mean, you think about there's GitHub.com, right? But then there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. There's a lot of things like Actions and Copilot and like all the other things that really kind of operate differently. Like I always tell my students when we talk about like kind of how we approach things, GitHub.com has really been designed to give lots of data away for free, right? That's a weird concept for most applications. That's not what they're doing. Things like Actions and stuff, those are more like a lot of computation on the back end. And so those services really do need to operate and be architected very differently. And so there's security teams that architect the applications and stuff like that. I don't look at that. I'm very much focused on how do we deploy our cloud infrastructure, and then being able to keep control and say, why did we deploy it this way? I mean, the fact that I've got let's say an S3 bucket that is exposed to the internet for a reason, right? What is the reason? How do I tell what that reason is? How can I automatically detect that that reason is not sufficient enough? That is like the second layer. But the very first thing we did was just enforce logging, we had logs turned on, but we enforced it and set it up so that there's alerting if the logs do not show up. That was a double checker. Making sure that any kind of security tooling. So we're in AWS and Azure. So Defender, Guard Duty, those things are turned on. They're enforced. They're everywhere. And we get alerts if they're not turned on. Like those things, the developer doesn't really have to worry about. They're very universal across the board. And those are like the first things you can just do. So.
Yeah, all right. I kind of take back my statement. It does sound like you guys do the good, not boilerplate, but the good industry standard stuff. Is there, you mentioned earlier that you do on-prem, and I had vaguely forgotten. I guess GitHub has some capabilities that you can do on-prem. What does that look like at GitHub?
I actually do not work on our on-prem environment, and we do have the ability for you to run GitHub Enterprise in your own environment. I mean, there's a lot of reason we do support in a lot of clouds just to help customers that are in those cloud services. But since they're not something that's managed, it's not part of our cloud architecture, like our cloud environment. We always look at the cloud environment as things that we manage, that we run for customers or for ourselves, and a lot of the things that do run in our on-prem environment, which is in our data center, and it looks and it's operated very much like a regular data center. You have to go through certain processes in order to deploy inside of that. You can only do certain kind of applications, and they're checked and they're rigorous, and they work great for those applications. But to be able to support research or testing or security team or teams that evaluate customer environments and work with the customer to improve their deployment at GitHub, they really need unique environments that they can set up very quickly. And so being able to distinguish all those different piles, even though it's all part of the same, environment that we're monitoring, is can be really difficult.
Right, right, right. Do you leverage some types of frameworks in on like on the cloud side? So I think a lot of the things that you kind of
Mhm.
mentioned sounded like they're very process oriented and not necessarily technology oriented. I mean,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure
yeah,
there's tech, but you know.
yeah. From a cloud perspective, I'm really kind of the feel that turning on the technical aspect is easy. Like being able to say, you should not have S3 buckets on the internet. There is a very, very much prescribed set of code that you can run to be able to block that. So that's not hard. The hardest part is how do you tell when they're doing it and why they're doing it. But for our frameworks, we actually use CIS as our benchmark. I like CIS because it not only it describes the requirement, but also links it to a benchmark to be very specific on this is why you're going to do it, and I can always point to that to the team. I don't have to rewrite it myself, which is really nice. I've worked with NIST before, and it's so over heavy-handed, right? I mean, it's just a lot of stuff, and so I always find the CIS is a good starting point. But it's not our only one. We work with the cloud providers; they have their own frameworks, and we'll take from those. GitHub has its own policy requirements for certain things. We use those to lock down, and then of course for FedRAMP, that's just another set of guidance. But we've got what we do is we basically identify things that we call a fundamental. A fundamental would be a group of security controls, technical security controls, to apply to a particular type of resource. So we have, OpenAI would be one, or the Azure's OpenAI infrastructure. So there's a set of requirements that we want everybody to implement. And then what we do is we actually use Wiz for our auditing service. And so we use Wiz to write up the control that says if you're using what would be a good one? Local access for Azure is a really big problem, right? So a lot of the resources have local access. We don't really want people doing that, but some people have to for certain cases. And so that's an alert that goes out and says you need to probably fix this or this or this. Um, and then it's up to the teams to kind of figure out how to get that done in the shortest amount of time possible. Then there are some things that we just completely block, which I'm not going to describe every single control, but there are things that we do not allow inside the environment. And then we'll use AWS service control policies or Azure policy to block those from ever happening. And our goal is to have more of those in the future, start identifying more and more controls that we can move from alerts to guardrails. And that's actually, a big focus right now is to improve that.
Cool. And you're touching on the future side of things. Is there, obviously, without necessarily going into the specifics, but is there sort of areas that you are looking forward that you think either you or as an industry would like to kind of get more focus or some change there?
Yeah, I would say uh, for guardrail implementation, AWS is not great at it. I mean, there's service control policies, but from a user perspective, if I create a service control policy that says that you cannot create IM users, let's say, I mean, this is very cloud jargon. I'm sorry about that, but these. Let's say we don't want to use IM users because they're really a terrible product that AWS still has. Um, If someone tries to create one, the response they'll get back is you are not authorized to do that, which is really not the case. The case is we do not allow this in our environment, but I have no real good way of communicating that to the end user. So that's like a kind of problem. That communication between the person creating the controls and the victim of the controls, that can be really hard to do. In AWS, I'm sorry, in Azure, it's great because I have Azure guardrails through Azure policy, and I can have customized messages, so I can be very articulated. This is why we're doing it. Here's a hyperlink to our internal service or description so that you can go and figure it out. I think that Azure has done a much better job with that. On the flip side, both the clouds have problems with insecure by default resources. So if you just turn it on, it'll have something that's insecure. I think the biggest one for me is in Azure. If you turn on a storage account, the storage account will create two keys. Those keys, if you have them, have full read, write, and delete privilege to all of the data in the storage account, and it bypasses Entra ID for logging if you use them. And they used to be called shared access keys because that's how they wanted apps to be able to interact with them. It's a terrible idea, but they I'm assuming it was done so that it'd be very quick for you to get your app up and running and you don't have to worry about all this other kind of stuff. So, I would really like for them to continue, and I think they're starting to do more of this, but to really continue to get rid of these um, insecure by defaults. And part of that is just making using the resources a lot easier and a lot friendlier. I think that's kind of the problem the cloud has. If I'm writing an application and I come in brand new and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, I'm going to get lost with all these things that I've got to create because it's all new jargon for me, and that's can be problematic.
For sure, and I can very much empathize with the side you were saying about like the permissions. I feel like that as an industry is something we have a lot to learn. Just getting a like you don't have permission is not super useful. And as developers, right, it's
Yeah.
easy to just like nope, but it's so much of
Yeah.
this is UX.
Yeah, and I mean, AWS has said that they do that so they don't provide too much information to an adversary trying to do something. And that is a point, but I don't think that point outweighs the pain and agony of the teams that you're trying to lock, when you're trying to lock in. If I require that a virtual machine has a tag when it's created, they'll get an error when they're trying to create a virtual machine that says you don't have permissions. That's not true. I just needed you to create a tag when you did it. So it's just very, very complex for them to do that. But I think AWS is changing. They've got, new kinds of like resource control policies that do allow custom tagging, which is great. And I think it only handles like 3 or 4 different kinds of resources. So it's not there yet, but I think that's the right direction. So
Yeah, and I suspect that a big part of this is also where they are in the life cycle, right? As a small startup, you probably want to optimize on the side of, hey, this is really easy. There's less steps. We're going to pre-create keys for you, right? So it's all done
yeah.
easy, and then at some point you get to AWS size where it's obviously how to work with AWS. If you don't, just you'll learn in the future. It's not our
Right.
problem, right? So it's good. It's good. Is there any other? Can you think of other kind of fundamental changes to the cloud providers that you think would have a big impact towards the future? Because you work day in day out in that, right?
I mean, I have to say AI, don't I? I mean, that's don't we have you have to say that in every podcast, right? To say AI. I don't know. I From a security standpoint, I think AI will change a lot of things because people are going to be using these these AI services, and if they don't use them properly or if they misunderstand how the thing's configured, they're going to provide the keys to the kingdom and all that kind of stuff that we can kind of see. I think the cloud providers have started trying to add AI into their security tooling, and I think the best case I've seen that is when in some products and even third-party products, instead of saying I need you to go fix this and provide it to you in a JSON format or something like that, right? Something very, generic. They're using AI to create a paragraph that is human readable by somebody who's not an expert that inserts the things like the IP address that you care about or the virtual machine and even generating the Terraform code that you should be using to implement it, like, or the scripts. I mean, kind of that help creating that generalization. I think that is going to be really great for recipients of security requirements, so that they don't have to really work too hard to figure out what's being asked of them and why it's important. So that communication factor, I think, is actually going to be really big. So, oh no, someone asked Terraform. Is somebody has seen? I actually do not like Terraform. And I have mentioned, so the big most conversation I've ever had on LinkedIn is when I said that I did not like Terraform. I really like CDK a lot better as a software developer, and the cloud development kit developed by AWS that lets me write Python to generate cloud formation. Straight up cloud formation just is just JSON. It just sucks. I don't do that. But and boy, a lot of people were mad at me when I said that. So, but I actually really a big fan of CDK, and then CDK has a Terraform based option that HashiCorp created where you can write Python and it generates Terraform, and it works pretty good. But we're a big Terraform shop at GitHub, so I don't get to pull out CDK very often. So I saw that in the chat and it just triggered me because I know I'm a minority, but I really don't like Terraform.
I also want to point out the interesting duality right before when you were saying, hey, AI, and instead of giving you, a JSON blob explanation of like what the problem is, getting an AI to interpret and just tell you what to do. This also feels like the first step into a really critical misconfiguration of infrastructure somewhere where it just told me to make the bucket
So
public,
I'm
so
just
I
going to
did.
do it. Yeah, that's always the problem. I mean, I think that's where, I don't think AI is not going to solve all our problems, and it has a lot of failures. And I believe that AI will be better and more better at providing that information if we are able to structure the data behind it a lot better. And so if we structure the data so that the AI understands it a lot better, then it can translate and converse a lot better. But I'm not an AI expert, so I don't know where that is. But I have definitely seen that when I re-architect some of my code to be more specific, Copilot understands it a lot better. And so is that on me or is that on Copilot? I don't know whose fault that is, but it's one of us. One of us has to improve their code. It's probably me. It's probably me that's got to improve the code. So.
Yes, yes, that also feels kind of dystopian in a weird way. Let's start. English is really difficult to understand. Let's switch it around so that the
Yeah.
AI gets better at it. Uh,
Well,
um,
I know in some of the documentation for Azure, and I don't remember where this is, but Azure will say this is how you would implement these findings, and it'll show you what the ARM template is. It'll show you the command line, and it'll show you Terraform. Somebody is not handwriting those. Like that is a translation that's being happened behind the scenes. I don't know if I would call that AI, but it's some kind of automated translation, and it works great. So it's perfect. So yeah, I love that.
oh yeah, for all the jokes, I think those kinds of things are crazy useful. Like the other big problem that, in my opinion, is kind of maps well to that in security and less in the engineering side is the rule writing, right? The
Yeah.
different formats of rules and querying. Certainly, we're working in that like day in day out. AI
Yeah,
should.
I find that it's helpful in writing rules a little bit. It gets me 80%, especially if I'm not quite sure how to do something. I don't have to go look up every value. It kind of gets there, but it doesn't always get it correct. So, but I think that might be just part of the input too. If we structure the documentation a little bit better, maybe it'll write the rules better. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and things like providing it the context that it needs. I know
Yeah.
that's one of the moves that we're doing is, injecting the customer's own schema into the
Yes.
data along with the queries so they can. Uh,
Which is great too, right? I mean, because then you're customizing for that individual. It's not a generic output. That's where we want to get to. Like if I've got a team, I make them responsible for fixing a problem. I don't want Shaun to have to write up exactly how everybody should do it. I should write up how it should be done. And then it'd be great if the tool can help translate that and make it more usable. That's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then the MCP servers entered the chat, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a can of worms these days.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else on your mind you wanted to chat about, or
No, I mean, I just
yeah?
say, cloud security is just it's huge. And then every time we think we got it covered, AI comes in or something else is going to come in after that. And it's always a cycle. And then just every day we just try and take a little bit step closer to safer and cleaner. And the more you can move from alerting to guardrails, the better you off are going to be in the long term. So that's always the goal.
Yes, absolutely. I think those are words of wisdom for sure, for sure. Awesome. If people want to get in touch with you on any topic, any best way to do that?
I mean, LinkedIn is the best place for me. So always can hit me up on LinkedIn and send a message, say I saw you on the podcast or whatever, and happy to say hi.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for coming in, having the chat. GitHub is certainly, I'll stick to my words. I think it's a unique place. So super
I'm
interesting.
enjoying it. Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you Defender Fridays next week.
All
See
right.
you.
Thanks.